Welcome one more day to Space and Harmony. Today, at request of one listener, and also due to the situation of extreme darkness that we are crossing, and due to the deceptions some want to impose on us by force, I will begin to present all the historic, anthropological, psychological, and even ontological evidences about the Messiahs, and especially the universal Messiah, or the primordial loving mind heart, which has been manifesting since immemorial time on earth, but began to be fully expressed through a man 2000 years ago. As it was said, the Logos became flesh. And today, this primordial loving mind heart continues to be expressed in a greater or lesser degree through a collective body of light beings to which many of us belong. And we have been working in teams since 2000 years ago. And our influence has been so powerful that dark forces had to hunt us down, torture us, slaughter us physically. But we keep coming, overcoming darkness, and being the nightmare for all those servants of darkness that don't seem to learn great lessons. Now, before going into this more in depth, I announced that the fourth session of the free course on Vital and Harmonia and Soul Therapy is now available on Vital and Harmonia channel, which is also bilingual in Spanish and English. And the session is on natural medicine and morphopsychology based on the four temperaments. This natural medicine was known by Essene therapists, by Greek and Arabian physiologists, and also in the Ayurveda of India. Down below you have the link. On the other hand, I don't know if you have noticed, but right now there is a very strong attack coming from darkness. Souls are being pulled down into chaotic timelines before much more light comes in 2021, which is going to be a year of changes, transformations, and we have to be adapted. I have been sensing this darkness with negative thoughts, negative emotions that do not come from my true light being. And I have been sensing this darkness in others as well. Surely you have noticed yourself agitated lately, with hate perhaps, or getting involved with absurd arguments, fighting with others maybe. So be watchful, because these are external radiations from collective egregores, psychic forms, and parasitic entities that interfere with our true life. And as I say, there is a strong bombardment right now. The other day, precisely, I even had a very strange dream where I saw myself isolated in some corridor with yellow and red colors. It looked like a labyrinth, and I was hearing some deep guttural voice coming from everywhere, apparently. But I knew this was a hallucination projected by some dark entity trying to scare me. But I didn't panic, so I woke up serene. These things should not distract us, and we don't have to fight like Jedi, chopping heads off, reacting with anger. We can shed light, keep serene without reacting, and we can also prevent certain negative thoughts or emotions that can attract these entities. We can clean our subconscious, traveling to the past in our consciousness to fix negative behaviors. This can be done through hypnotherapy or through active contemplation, something which I discovered naturally years ago, many years ago actually. It involves conscious relaxation, and thus I access many forgotten memories of my soul. And every day, before sleeping, I try to clean up negative memories, remembering what I did in the past or throughout the day, recognizing mistakes, shifting behaviors in my mind. And I will talk about all this in the free course on Vital Harmonia and also on the course on harmonic psychotherapy, which I teach by video conference. Precisely, this has also to do with today's topic because we are going to travel to the past and learn more about certain events that were recorded by historic authors. And we have to change our viewpoints, allowing wounds to be healed. Now, let's see the historical evidence of the universal Messiah. First of all, I would like to clarify that I have been researching this question thoroughly for at least 25 years, first on my own, but also academically, because although I now develop what I call harmonic psychotherapy, based on my own studies on harmonia, music, and spiritual Kabbalistic psychotherapy, which I studied in an institute, I also completed a degree in philosophy and studied anthropology. And one of my specialties was studying ancient texts in their original language, investigating the origin of Christianity. And I even studied with a professor who claimed to be able to rescue the Aramaic background of the Gospels. And I deduced this Aramaic background is real, although some of the translations of this professor were not convincing to me. This was 20 years ago. And years later, I began to study Hebrew and Aramaic on my own, discovering clues about the Essene teachings and different lines, different followers of the Messiah. And all this remind me of my mission on earth. And I have to confess that I was not convinced either by some of the historical quotes usually brought to light to demonstrate the existence of the Messiah associated with Judeo-Christianity, especially the famous Flavian Testimony, which is a text attributed to the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus. And there we find clear Christian interpolations. Therefore, there is something manipulated and it's doubtful. You have this text referenced with interpolations in parentheses in the article that I will publish on the blog, Song of Reality, the music of wisdom.blogspot.com. But for now, let's keep in mind that there are references that are very valuable, and we will see that there are many which are historical information concerning the brother of the Master, Jacob the Just, which was also mentioned by Flavius Josephus and other authors. And you will see there is no Flavian conspiracy, which is something famous today. Many are denying the existence of the Messiah, affirming that the Gospels are completely invented by the Flavian emperors with the help of Flavius Josephus, something which to me is rather preposterous. Now, to start opening the box of truths, the references to a Messiah and to the Christians made by the Roman historians on the 1st century cannot be ruled out. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Pliny the Younger are interesting because they not only belong to this frame of time, 1st, 2nd century, they are external commentators and they are neither Christian nor Jewish. Tacitus even mentions that the one called Christos suffered the death penalty under the reign of Tiberius and Pontius Pilate, and Suetonius refers to a Messiah who stirred up the Jews with his behavior, and all this fits perfectly with the figure mentioned in the New Testament. I leave those references in the article in case you are interested, but they are so well known that I'm not going to repeat what others have said, but I will contribute with something not usually known. I also add one of my favorite quotes, that of Syrian Mara Barserapion, mm, which alludes to the murder of three wise men, Pythagoras, Socrates, and the Jewish king. And notice how his language is neither Jewish nor Christian, but rather of someone that loves wisdom and recognizes what has been known since the first century. Now, to give another well known quote, one of great value is that found in the Babylonian Talmud, in the passage Sanhedrin Tractate 43a, which states Yeshua was hanged on the eve of Passover, Pesach, for leading the people of Israel, to apostasy and practicing magic. Now, taking into account the hate that many Talmudist Jews have had towards Christians, it is not possible to think that this is a forgery, because if they denied that Yeshua was the Messiah, why didn't they say that he did not exist, that he was an invention? They affirm the existence of the man many consider to be the Messiah, and they mention the Aramaic form of the name, which is presumably pronounced Ishua. Although in the 1930s, a new religion emerged from the Seventh-day Church, and it was called the Sacred Name Movement. And this promoted the revival of Hebrew roots. And apart from promoting the names Yahweh for the Tetragrammaton and Yeshua for the Messiah, then later on came the theory that the name Yesu was an insult and an acronym which meant be the name and memory of him erased. But from my point of view, this is not clear. And moreover, there is evidence that the name Yaosa, Yaoshua, Ishu was not only used by the Hebrews in the Torah and by the translators of the Septuagint Bible, but also used by Hindus, Celts, and Egyptians in different forms. They applied to the incarnation of a solar king or avatar or the primordial mind, but they must have inherited this or stolen it from ancestors, maybe the Israelites or another source. In any case, the name associated with the universal mind, the universal Messiah, spread everywhere, but each culture absorbed it and applied to lesser anointed ones, false messiahs. But I will talk about this in the following video, since there are many historic anthropological data usually ignored by people. Now we have to remember a figure that almost no one mentions, and the Roman Church made many efforts to erase him, to the point they changed his name, calling him James, the brother of the Lord. They say it in a religious way. But the New Testament calls him Jacob, on which there are innumerable historic references, since he was one of the most famous righteous men, tzaddikim, in the first century. And it should not be confused with the two apostles that were called similarly, Jacob the Great, son of Zebedee, the brother of John, Johanan, and Jacob the Lesser, the son of Alphaeus. So the third Jacob, Jacob the Just, was mentioned in Mark 6:3 and Matthew 13:55. And with reference to the master, we hear, "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Mariam and his brothers Jacob, Joseph, Simon, and Judas?" And on this, there is a top-class researcher who has studied the subject more than anyone, probably. And he even accessed Qumran texts. I am referring to Professor Robert Eisenman. He's from North America, and he wrote a huge book called James, the Brother of Jesus. And this is a great source of historic evidence about Jacob the Just. And as Eisenman says, find Jacob the Just and you will find his brother, Yeshu, or Jesus, as they say in English. All the evidence on Jacob points definitely to the master, as you shall see. In fact, he is also known as the brother of the master, or the Lord's brother in a rather Greco-Babylonian religious language, and even Paulo of Tarsus called him thus. And in Galatians 1, he says, after 3 years spent in Damascus, possibly studying with Ebionite Essenes, according to my research, I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and stayed with him for 15 days. But I did not see any other of the apostles, except Jacob, the brother of the Lord. In this I write to you, behold, I am not lying before God. So he was telling the truth, probably. These letters attributed to Paulo are a real historical document, not produced by the Roman Church or Romanized Christians. Therefore, they are very valid as a historic document. And interestingly, Jacob did not become an apostle until the master appeared to him after the hanging and his transcendence. That's in 1 Corinthians 15:7. In the Testament or Gospel of Thomas, we also hear in the Logion 12 that Yeshu tells the apostles to follow Jacob, the righteous. In fact, he became one of the 3 pillars of the Nazarene congregation of Jerusalem, as Paul himself testifies in Galatians 2:9-12. The other 2 were Johanan and Cephas, popularized as John and Peter. On the other hand, Jacob is also credited with the canonical letter misnamed as James' letter. So the question is, what were all these documents attesting for? Was it all a Roman invention? And this is impossible because there are numerous extra testamentary and non-Roman references. For example, Professor Eisenman suggested something very shocking, and is that Jacob Atzadik was the famous master of righteousness mentioned by the Essene Ebionite community of Qumran, whose texts have become very famous, as you might know. And he also identifies the wicked priest that this text mentioned. Actually, the Ebionites fled to the desert, probably because of this wicked priest. Later on, you'll see why. According to Eisenman, that priest was Ananias, the one who ordered the stoning of Jacob. You'll see the text. And this has an overwhelming logic. Now, the most surprising thing is that Eisenman also says that the man of lies, also mentioned by the Qumranic text, is nothing less than Paul of Tarsus. And although this is not entirely confirmed, there is evidence to think this is the case, because even Paulo recognizes that some Jewish followers of the Messiah did not consider him as an apostle. That's in 1 Corinthians 9:2. Actually, we know that there were dissensions, quarrels between the followers of Paulo, the head of the Hellenizing Nazarenes as told in the Acts of the Apostles, and the Hebrew Nazarene congregation of Jerusalem, led by Jacob, Johanan, and Cephas, better known as James, John, and Peter. And Jacob himself was a strict Ebionite, and he asked Paulo to tell his Christian followers to refrain from eating meat sacrificed to idols, blood, and strangled animals. Others even asked for circumcision as well for the pagans, but this was too much, so it was not done. They didn't oblige to perform that ritual. And a letter of Peter even says that Paulo's teachings were complicated and many were interpreting them in their own way to their own downfall. And although he is right, let's keep in mind that Paul's task was to reach out non-Jews. So in a sense, his language was adapted to the pagans. Actually, I think many were already Christians in some way, because Christianity is the oldest religion and it comes from prehistoric times, actually from a prehistoric teaching that was not religion but rather a school of self-study, and this was mirrored on monuments, temples, and the psychological teaching. We'll see all this. Now, it's also important to point out that Judaism at that time was not the rabbinic Judaism of today. There were multiple sects, Judaic sects, and perhaps the most pure was the Essene, even though there were several Essene sects. We have Nazarene Essenes linked to the school of Mount Carmel. There were Essenes in Jerusalem, close to Jerusalem, and also Therapeutai in Egypt. But the master was very critical with the Essenes as well, since many of them were too strict, and that was not a demonstration of true compassion and love. Now, as I said, Jacob was considered to be a tzaddik, a righteous man of the time, and the historian Flavius Josephus tells in his Jewish Antiquities that Jacob, the brother of Jesus, was sent by the high priest of the Temple of Jerusalem to be stoned. Although Hegesippus, another historian, says that they threw him from a tower of the temple, as they had done with Stephen. But in general, Flavius' account is considered to be more reliable, and the reason is that the high priest asked Jacob to speak publicly to the followers of the Messiah and tell them that issue was not the son of the Holy Bird, the Son of God as it is called, but far from obeying. Legend has it that Jacob made a memorable, amazing speech on the Son of Man, the Ben Adam, which, as you know, was a code that works in two directions, both as the son of Adam and the son of the primordial father, Adam Kadmon, primordial Adam. And this agitated, to some extent, the masses on the temple and annoyed the religious leaders. So the high priest, the Sadducee Ananias, had Jacob executed because he feared losing religious hegemony. And Josephus describes this as follows. He called to trial Jacobus, the brother of Jesus, who is called Christos, and with him he had several others, some of his companions, and he accused them of being breakers of the law and sentenced them to be stoned. Now, another curious detail is that, according to Flavius Josephus, this event made many Jews angry because even though they were not followers of the Messiah, they respected Jacob Tzaddik, who was a righteous man, pure as an Ebionite. And we also know that both the Nazarene Christian followers of Paulo and the Nazarene congregation of Jerusalem were gaining strength, and this was seen as a threat both by the Jewish and Roman leaders. Moreover, shortly afterwards, even the Romans started to massacre the Hellenizing Nazarene Christians and Jewish Nazarenes in mass because they were causing some sort of a spiritual social revolution in Jerusalem, Rome, and other parts. And this is why some Nazarenes fled to the desert and the Hellenic Christians hid in the catacombs. But they were not the later Romanized Christians who emerged after the mass extermination as a version of light Christianity in service of the Roman Empire. And this was the origin of a new type of Christianity that degenerated into what today people call Christianity, which are thousands of different denominations. And all this leaves no room for discussion. The historical evidence is overwhelming, contrary to the Flavian conspiracy that is now so fashioned, according to some people, such as the author of Caesar's Messiah. The figure of Jesus and the Gospels is a total invention forged by the Flavian family, especially the emperors Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. One of them would have been the promoter of the idea of presenting a docile and non-violent Messiah to avoid riots and problems of religion. And the main argument they give for the forgery is that they made it using the technique of typology, copying types, allegories from the Old Testament, giving them a new shape to make the New Testament. But we will see that this is due to the art of allegorical transmission used since ancient times. And what is evident is that the New Testament could not come out of a bloodthirsty mind, not even with the help of Flavian Josephus, who was allowed to be part of the family as a favor. He was the official historian. So this case is very much like the quote from the Talmud. If Flavius Josephus had wanted to pacify the Nazarenes, he would not have said that his second leader, Jacob the Righteous, was stoned to death. And tell me why the Roman Empire had to exterminate the Jewish and Hellenic Nazarenes, why they had to hide in the desert caves, catacombs. That's historic evidence. And all this explains the Qumran text as well. So this cannot be an invention. And there are many other preposterous theories which see strange codes and very convoluted signatures in the New Testament, when in any case there is Hebrew wisdom and Greek gematria under the surface, and this can be mathematically proven even with Hebrew language, but this does not invalidate the New Testament, quite the contrary. And in the next video I will bring the anthropological, psychological and ontological evidence, since what happened 2000 years ago was the massive emergence of several groups and branches that followed a specific headmaster, Messiah. And obviously Paul and others used ancient Christianity as a vehicle of transmission, but later on the Roman Empire took advantage of that Christian religion to expand the conquests, and the Vatican is the nucleus of all this. Anyway, all this phenomenon cannot be explained without the presence of a figure, a great master, and this is called a principle of cultural discontinuity, since culture tends to repetition and stagnation. So if there is a great change, something happens. And this also corroborates prophecies that came from ancient times. There were many pretentious messiahs and anointed kings, but the universal messiah in a strict sense, the primordial loving mind, taking shape in a human being, manifested fully through a person to spread later on as a collective influence throughout the collective body, as spoken in many teachings. And as it was demonstrated, few are able to overcome death and continue working through time and space as a collective body, the branches of the tree of life to which many of us belong. That's the origin of the name Netzarim, branches, which is not a religion. Anyway, we'll continue in the next video. So thanks for listening with attention. If you found this inspiring, give thumbs up and subscribe to promote the channel and receive notifications. Remember, I will leave this written on the blog when the article is finished. Down below you have the link. Remember, there is another bilingual channel called Vital and Harmonia. And until the next time, blessings of supraconditional love and modified life, integral conscience and infinite blissful serenity.